be kicking off at any moment now. So you can grab your coffee and take a seat. Thank you. Good morning to you all. A warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So you can still find your way, grab a seat, pick your coffee, grab a seat. So I take this opportunity to welcome you all to day 2 at the M4D stage. For this particular session where we look at scaling Agritech solutions. So what disruptive business models are able to do in terms of just being able to build resilient food systems. It is our hope that you are already making connections and also facilitating cross-learnings at your different levels. And without taking much time, allow me to call upon our head of financial inclusion and Agritech at the GSMA to come and share her opening remarks. Welcome, Ashley. A round of applause, please.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. It's a pleasure to open this session on scaling Agritech solutions, disruptive business models to build resilient food systems. As we meet here in Kigali, a hub of digital innovation in Africa, we do so at a pivotal time for the agriculture sector. Food demand globally is expected to rise by over 50% in the next 2 years, or 2 decades, sorry. Yet today, more than 780 million people go hungry. At the same time, the very systems that feed us are under immense pressure, from climate change, volatile markets, and constrained access to finance. Smallholder farmers who produce up to 80% of the food consumed in sub-Saharan Africa are at the center of this story. They face multiple challenges: limited access to agronomic information, markets, and financial services. For many, traditional models of agricultural extension or input delivery are too costly, too slow, and too limited to reach. Yet there is hope. This is also where innovation is transforming possibilities. Digital agriculture solutions are helping farmers access real-time information, weather forecasts, market prices, and digital financial services. Studies have highlighted the potential of digital innovations to deliver up to 170% yield improvements and income gains of 20 to 60%. This is by improving decision-making, reducing risk, and linking farmers more effectively to markets. Over the past 2 years, the GSMA Agritech Accelerator, supported by GIZ and BMZ, has been at the forefront of this transformation. The program worked with 9 agri-tech innovators across Africa and Asia, from Winich Farms in Nigeria to Greenovator in Cambodia, helping them to scale digital solutions that drive farmer productivity, inclusion, and climate resilience. Some of the results have been remarkable. Over 335,000 new farmers registered to digital services, 89% of whom reported better access to agricultural information. And 100,000 women farmers gained improved access to digital tools. 6 cohort members collectively raised over $1.3 million in external funding. And we saw the launch of 3 new agri-tech solutions and major upgrades to 7 existing ones, all designed with farmers at the center. Beyond the numbers, this work revealed important lessons about what it takes to scale agri-tech innovations sustainably. First, user-centered design matters. Farmers adopt tools that are simple, trusted, and available in local languages. Second, access to capital remains a bottleneck. Few agri-techs can grow without patient, blended finance. Third, partnerships with MNOs, agribusinesses, and financial institutions are catalytic to scale. And finally, inclusive models that intentionally reach women and youth are not just socially impactful, they make business sense. So, as we open today's session, we're not only celebrating innovation, we're asking the critical question: how do we build agri-tech business models that are both impactful and sustainable, capable of transforming food systems at scale? I look forward to hearing insights from our distinguished panelists who bring deep experience in building and scaling agri-tech innovations across Africa. Thank you for being here and for your continued commitment to digital agriculture. Kevin, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And once again, we welcome you to this particular session. So to help me discuss this interesting topic about scaling agtech solutions or agtech innovations, allow me to call upon a mix of panelists who will share cross-cutting lessons or learnings on the basis of the work that they're already doing in their own environment. So allow me to call upon Justin Umutoni. Justin, please join us. So Justin is a research associate for CGIAR, and also she's a lead for Agritech for Rwanda, which is a new mechanism rolled out here in Rwanda to catalyze agtech innovations. Next on stage, allow me to call Riches Atai. Riches is co-founder and CEO of Winich Farms. So Winich has also been doing amazing work in Nigeria, where they're basically operating an e-commerce platform. Next on stage, allow me to call Seema Gohil. Seema is the director of DigiFarm. Thank you, Seema. Last but not least, allow me to call Matt Strickland. Matt is the director of the GSMA Agritech program. So welcome, Matt. So thank you all for joining this particular panel today, and feel welcome. So off to our first question, which is basically to help us understand your institutions and the kind of solutions that you're putting out in your respective markets. So probably I can start with Riches. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. I'm Riches Atai. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Winich Farms. At Winich, we say we're building the commerce infrastructure and embedded finance for Africa's informal processors, retailers, and rural smallholder farmers. And what this typically means is we have identified how three major core problems that we identified that is faced in the informal agro-food supply chain. The first is poor access to market. The next is traceability, tracking and traceability of how food moves at each layer of the value chain. And then lastly, the financial inclusion for rural smallholder farmers. So this is pretty much the three layers that we are solving for. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Riches. Next, I would go to Justin. And when we were having discussions prior to this particular session, there was a few interesting things around the patient capital that you guys will be deploying. So as you introduce your mechanism, please mention that a bit.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm part of the team in Alliance Biodiversity International CEAT and the unit of CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance. And maybe some of you that are new in the country or have traveled from far, the beans, if in any chance you had it on your plate today, the beans that are in the country has been provided by Alliance. It is our research findings that we have already provided, and with the collaboration of Rwanda Agriculture Board, and the beans since 1987. So we are quite good with the science here already, and CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance now comes in as climate financing with a partnership with the Rwanda Green Fund, that is the investment vehicle of the country. So throughout the whole process to see, we have, yes, the research findings, we have what it takes to bring in such research findings on table, and at some point we also have the issue of having the findings laying on our shelves. So now we brought in the idea of now how do we make sure that these findings now go into practices. So scaling the small businesses, the SMEs, the Agritechs that are already doing the right practices on ground, those that are fitting with the findings that we had, how do we make sure now they work for the benefit of the agricultural sector and the smallholder farmers at the end. So we came up with the different cohorts. We had the agri-SMEs that now we go into acceleration to make sure now they understand better the practices, the practicability of the solutions that they already have in place, and how it works for the smallholder farmers level and the responding to agricultural sector in general. And then the Agritech now comes in, how do we now make sure that we scale all those solutions to make sure now the impact goes beyond what you do and impact the smallholder farmers and respond to what the country resilient goals that we have, and now be a solution as we want. So the patient capital, as you mentioned, we, in partnership with the investment vehicle that is Rwanda Green Fund, scale them. Yes, we provide the capital with difference. Some come in 100% grant, and some provide a recoverable grant. So when it comes like a recoverable grant, is not the, you need to pay back, but we provide you with the foundation skills that you also need to be in and provide solutions that really work for the benefit of smallholder farms and the sector in general, but then you need to pay back. So when it comes to paying back, it's different with the banks. So at the banks, you also pay some percentage of the interest. Now you are provided with technical assistance, bespoke, that are tailored. You are held to make sure that it works. You understand better, make sure the business model works, and then at the end, you only pay the principal amount. And it's a long period, five years, which is not going to work with the bank. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin. Over to you, Seema.
Morning, everyone. So DigiFarm is an Agritech. We're a subsidiary within the broader Safaricom group. What we do is actually provide smallholder farmers with a one-stop shop. Giving them a platform at the touch of their fingers on their mobile phones where they can access all the services that they need to drive production improvements, but then also connecting them to markets on the same platform. So we have the entire agriculture ecosystem within a single platform. And then one of the most critical gaps that we've seen, and that's really where we provide our core product, is financing. So there's really, I think it's about $78–80 billion gap in sub-Saharan Africa for agri-financing. And so through digital solutions, we now provide embedded financing to all the ecosystem players. So yeah, that's DigiFarm in a nutshell.
Thank you. To Matt, I want to make it a bit different because I know you are looking after a mechanism. So briefly describe what the Agritech Accelerator program probably focused on, how you structured it, and as you finish, maybe you can mention something about maybe something that excites you generally in the current Agritech markets.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So as Ashley shared the kind of key stats and headlines of what the accelerator was about, so within the Agritech program, we've been working with a variety of stakeholders over the last 15 years to improve the livelihoods, financial inclusion and climate resilience of smallholder farmers. So this accelerator was really focused on a kind of semi-new area for us, the Agritech program, but specifically working directly with Agritech companies themselves to really understand the challenges that they faced in developing, growing, and partnering with different actors in the space. So in order to do this, we know, as Seema's just said, there's this massive funding gap for Agritechs. So what we wanted to understand is why is that gap existing? What is the mismatch between what Agritechs are saying, how they're presenting themselves, and what investors want to hear? So we structured the accelerator across 3 key work streams, which was, one was user experience or UX to really look at the product and understand from the founder's perspective and the team that they were working with, is this service delivering what they intend? And is it something that the smallholder farmer sees value in? Because fundamentally, if there's no value proposition there for the smallholder, they're going to stick with what they're doing. If it doesn't generate direct benefit and quickly, then there's no real incentive to get onto that service or even start paying for that service. So from the user experience perspective, it was really, let's work with these teams, let's go and talk to the farmers, let's understand the ecosystem and the different stakeholders to identify areas that can be improved in how they're delivering that service and making it available to the farmer. Alongside that, we did a lot of work on impact, so measuring, monitoring, evaluation and learning to put some numbers behind that change with the user experience and the product iteration activities to understand, okay, we've made this change, now what's the change? I think some of the stats that Ashley shared in terms of, improved access to the service, the actual number of registered users on these services, and more importantly, active users. Let's measure that, and we can feed that back into this product iteration cycle. So let's make a change, let's measure it, let's feed it back in and see where else we can tweak and improve things. And then thirdly, was plugging into this more polished service with some impact stats. How do we then use that story to go and talk to investors to raise that capital that these Agritechs need in order to further scale and grow their service? So having some, yes, investors like to see the impact and the kind of social good aspect, but fundamentally, it's a business transaction. They need to see the revenue model, the business model, and potentially the exit, or yes, the exit later. And impact is important, but if you can wrap that up in the story of we're growing our user base, we're growing our revenue, and we're having impact, that's a really powerful story to put in front of investors. Yep. So just on your final point about what's exciting. So this was obviously a competitive process to apply to the accelerator and select them. And what's fabulous to see is that over the 15 years we've been doing this, the number of new entrants that are coming in, there is still innovation happening. We know it's a difficult market, but each year you see more and more entrants using different types of technology, approaching things from different angles. So the fact that there is still the enthusiasm and innovation happening is really great to see.
Yep.
Thank you, Matt. And just picking it up from where you talk about the enthusiasm for more players to get into that particular market, allow me to now move on to the important subject around scaling these particular innovations. So if I could ask Riches, for example, we know there are specific motivations that drove you to actually set up Winich, but even as you set up Winich and you're now trying to actually scale and achieve the desired impact across the markets or across the states that you're currently operating in, what are some of the greatest challenges that you've had to navigate to achieve the current scale that you're enjoying within your market?
Thanks a lot, Kevin. I think that's a very interesting question. First, founding motivation for, you know, setting up Winich pretty much stemmed from seeing how much value is being lost at the informal segment of the market, uh, especially to rural smallholder farmers. Again, having first-hand experience on that from my parents, my grandparents, who were, you know, first-time smallholder farmers as well. Uh, Howbeit, as we have grown and deployed our solution, the challenges we have faced have pretty much changed over time. But if I would speak to maybe two of the biggest challenges that we've faced, so I'll speak to when we just started and then currently where we are now. So when we first started, it wasn't technology that was the biggest challenge. As a matter of fact, it was trust and adoption. Because the informal segments of the market, that's, when I'm talking about the informal segment of the market here, I'm referring to where the rural smallholder farmers, you know, operate. They live a very communal lifestyle. And because of that, should you deploy a solution that they like, you know, it goes as like wildfire. You wouldn't have to spend a dime on marketing. On the other hand, if you do something or deploy a product that is messy, you will equally have to struggle because they will equally spread the same news like wildfire. So trust was such a huge thing to overcome at the time because these farmers have been used to a particular way of doing things. So having them transit from that particular way that they have been used to for quite a long time into something else, not necessarily an entirely new thing entirely, but just having them, you know, move the needle from what they were doing before to something else was such a huge challenge for us to face. And how we overcame that was by giving trust first. And by doing this, we had to deploy our solution in a way I refer to as locally. So while producing or creating technology that is very scalable, we were deploying it on a very local level by introducing vernacular languages, their local languages where needed, deploying agent centers, and by agent centers, ensuring that the agents were people that stem from that community, as against, you know, bringing a foreigner or an alien into their communities to serve as the agent. So that was the main challenge that we faced at the beginning. But right now, having grown to where we are currently, servicing about 300,000 farmers as of today, one key challenge that we've had to face is in terms of payment. Now, operating in a country like Nigeria, where we're operating, where mobile money is not as prevalent as it is in East Africa, say Kenya, Rwanda, for example, even Ghana in West Africa, it's been a huge challenge because farmers have before now been transacting on a cash-based level. So having to now introduce digital payments for them was equally a very tough space to crack. Thankfully, we are making tremendous progress at it through partnerships with some commercial banks in the country, some of the biggest commercial banks like Sterling, Providus, and the likes. And so far, of the 300,000 farmers that we have, over 100,000 of them have been able to adopt this, and it's growing very rapidly. So this has been, again, when we started and where we are now, the kind of challenges we have faced and how we have tried solving this, you know, as we drive scalability. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Maybe to move on to Justin. Thanks for describing the mechanism that you people have been able to put together. And I know it's as a result of a coalition of a number of complementing actors or stakeholders. So what's the motivation behind putting together that kind of a coalition of stakeholders to be able to support agriculture innovation in Rwanda? And while you tackle that, you can tie it to what are your expectations as that particular mechanism? What are your expectations come the end of the program?
Thank you so much, Kevin. As Matt said, when scaling the agritech companies, as Richard said, there are always challenges. And doing it alone doesn't really work. So bringing in different stakeholders that really play a big role, as it really brings, it ensures that you're going to deliver what really intends to have the impact at the end. So having, for the case of the Agritech for Rwanda, we bring in the ESO that has expertise in the venture to really coach about the financial viability, investment readiness, to understand what the businesses are, so what do they do the diagnostics, and bring in now the part of the science. The ESO does not really bring the science in, but now bringing the backed science to understand, is data driven, does it really respond to what the farmer needs? Does it really speak, as he mentioned that they have vernacular languages into the agri-tech solution they're providing? Do we really see that as a solution that really fits to the sector? Does it really deliver what the farmer needs to hear? Does it really gives what a farmer needs to understand? Now bringing in different stakeholders, it brings a stake to everyone to really understand what do you really bring on and how does it really work. So having that engagement as different stakeholders really fits to, you bring a new effort, I bring another one, we move together, and then I can testify that this really brings sector to a further step. The current program that we're running, we run it with one of the ESO and Rwanda Green Fund. And to be specific, the Rwanda Green Fund didn't have the agriculture proportion. It was very minor, it was under 5%. And then increasing the investment into the sector needs more stakeholder that really understand what it takes to really go into agriculture, that brings in the science, that also brings in the assurance that it's gonna work. I want to invest in the risking that investment is also needed, and that now brings in the science part. So the Agritech for Rwanda comes in as a solution to see what the Agritech, given that the tech is evolving, the AI, or the agriculture, when it comes to, let's now bring in the solutions to the agriculture sector. How do we now make it work in the agriculture sector? So it's very exciting to see now the tech companies venturing in agriculture, bringing in solutions, and we're excited to see what it can bring when we scale these businesses.
Thank you, thank you. So I think what I'm picking from the first two panelists is around multi-stakeholder kind of an effort. Mm-hmm. And the question I wanted to pose to you, Seema, now that you've been with DigiFarm for like 3 years, I know DigiFarm has been there for longer, but basically, what are some of the evolution that you've seen since the time that you've been leading on this, and how does this fit into the bigger strategy by the holding company, Safaricom? And I know you also invite and work with lots of other partners, both internal and external. So how has this contributed to the evolution that you're currently seeing within DigiFarm?
Sure. So I think the evolution of DigiFarm, I'll break that down into a couple of things. I'll start with the customer. I think our core customer always will be and has been the smallholder farmer, right? I think as Ashley was mentioning, 80% of the food actually is produced by them. But over the years, what we've seen is that for the smallholder farmer to actually succeed, the ecosystem around the farmer has to also succeed. And those systems aren't fully in place in most value chains. So really the first thing that has evolved for us over the last few years is our customer base. So not only do we serve and build solutions for the farmer, but we've now expanded that to include the entire agriculture ecosystem. So, on the production side, you've got the agrovets who are critical stakeholders, the input suppliers, whether it's soil testing, mechanization, all the service providers have to be considered, because without them, the farmer doesn't get the tools and services they need to produce. So that's been an expansion. On the other side, we've expanded to the market, right? So I think we were really excited. We drove production improvements, but farmers had nowhere to take it, right? So really then what we evolved was to now build out the technology to connect farmers to market. So market access, the tools for cooperatives, for small agri-SMEs that are purchasing directly from farmers is what we've built out, and kind of built the entire tech platform connecting the ecosystem. So the SMEs and the cooperatives today have digital collections tools. So they have Bluetooth weighing scales, they can collect directly, pay farmers directly, so the entire ecosystem. So the customer base, I think, was one of the critical evolutions. The second then to match that was the product. So the product is also then involved, like I said, there's an entire platform. So the tech layer evolved to include all the different stakeholders. But then, I think what we also, especially looking at partnerships, different ag techs and innovations, it's a complicated market. We can't do everything ourselves, and we shouldn't be. And so what we then did is say, what is our core focus, and what is the product that we are best positioned to serve farmers with, or the ecosystem with? For us, that evolution has been financial products. So critically, what we provide, as much as we provide the tech, the platform, what we provide is embedded financing. All the way from the agrovets to farmers to then the off-takers, the entire ecosystem. You're providing liquidity throughout that. So I think for us, that's probably been the two key areas of evolution, which then, on the question of partnerships, led us to bring in third-party providers. For example, insurance providers, we partner with them, we provide with the agrovets, like I mentioned, and then we're continuing to now add service providers like digital extension. So we have partners who provide that. And then on the financial inclusion side, we partner with banks. So the banks are the ones actually providing credit. And that really has been the last 2 years that we've brought on the banking partners to allow us to do that and to scale. I think lastly on how this fits within the broader Safaricom strategy, I think for us, really, we look at technology as a way to transform lives, right? And I think when you really look at rural populations, tends to be mostly agriculture and smallholder farmers, it really lives to our purpose of transforming lives. On the digital side, I think what we still see is rural populations are being left behind, right? So that digital infrastructure, even the basics like a smartphone, data access, that still needs to be built out. And then again, with like the broader M-Pesa ecosystem and having financial inclusion as a key pillar, that's kind of how we look at the broader strategy.
Thank you for that. And maybe to Matt, I know you've been part of like 3 different programs within the GSMA. Mm-hmm. So when you guys were crafting M-Nutrition or the Innovation Fund or the Accelerator Program, what is that one thing that informed a difference in the next program?
Okay. So it's probably we probably can't pin it down to one thing, but there's definitely kind of a key learning from each program that led into the next. So thank you for reminding me that when I joined 10 odd years ago, we were in our M-Nutrition program. So prior to that, when the program started, we were working with telcos to develop services for smallholders. And essentially, these were services that were designed in a nice glass building in the city centre and then pushed out the door, and let's see what sticks. So the program quickly evolved and realised, actually, we need to get into the field and understand, what does the farmer need and how do we build something that works for them. So M-Nutrition was fundamentally, it was focused around trying to get nutritional advice through to smallholder farmers so that they could make more of what they had, so targeting subsistence farmers, making sure that they could make more of what they were growing and some of the sort of byproducts of what they were growing to be more nutritionally aware, let's say. And so we were working with telcos specifically with some UX support or user experience support to build these services, again, obviously measuring, monitoring and feeding that back into the product iteration cycle. But this was very much mass market, B2C, effectively spray and pay. Let's promote it, let's push it out there, let's segment the user base, let's push it to the relevant users. And it was successful to a point in terms of, I think there's now over 14 million people on those services now, even after the end of the program. But that stickiness in some cases was difficult to maintain in that, particularly with advisory, once people have been through one sort of annual cycle of the advice in terms of land prep, pest control, harvesting, post-harvest handling, you need to keep refreshing that advice. Otherwise, people tune out and, I've heard this before, or, it's not new and exciting anymore, so why am I paying for this? I've already heard this. So that's really difficult, especially, and we'll come on to this, but in kind of grant and 3-year cycles of programs, the telco didn't really have the means or impetus to invest in developing that new content. But also the making sure that that content is actionable and not just here's some advice, but here's some advice and this is how to implement it on your farm, making sure it's contextually relevant, getting it translated, making sure that the nuance of that message fits with umpteen, 43 odd languages in Ghana, I think it was. Which ones do you pick? How do you make sure that the message is getting through once it's been translated? So from M-Nutrition, we moved into the Innovation Fund, which was much more around B2B2C. So, sorry, in M-Nutrition we had, talking about disruptive business models, so there was essentially pay-per-use for, so Sri Lanka, they had a very simple business model, which was 1 rupee per day, per crop per day. So you want to access just on maize for 30 days, that's 30 rupees at the end of the month. Others were kind of a freemium type model, so you can access a couple of messages for free, but then if you want more, you've got to pay a small fee, and then you get free access for the end of the month. Some were kind of basically free, but they used third parties to kind of subsidize that product. And then in one instance, it was more of a subscription model, and really the market wasn't ready for subscription, particularly with top-ups, and people were getting confused about why their account was being deducted a certain amount of funds each month when they kind of essentially forgotten they had signed up, or maybe, forgotten how to sign up, or that they had signed up, but also forgotten how to unsubscribe, and this billing system was just deducting each month, which obviously is not a good place to be. So the evolution of that was, okay, if the smallholders are struggling to pay for these services, then maybe where is there a stakeholder who understands the idea of investing in their business to improve efficiency? So with the Innovation Fund, this was much more geared towards agribusinesses. So leveraging, Rish has already mentioned trust, so leveraging so this was informal value chain, so tea, coffee, dairy, etc. Leveraging their relationship with farmers who are constantly selling to them year on year, so they're not having to go out and find new customers, establish new relationships, but leveraging their network of extension managers or field agents to reach the farmers, be able to take the time to onboard them as to why this service is useful and interesting, but also with that service, provide metrics to the agribusiness to say, okay, you now have a facility to send information to your farmers, but actually you can now also gather metrics about the crop coming off the field. So Seema talking about digitizing, Bluetooth scales. Giving that company a value proposition as well for investing in this service. And just as an example, so in Sri Lanka, we were using Bluetooth scales there, and the farmers were used to these analog scales and the amount of tea they were harvesting being rounded down to the nearest half kilo. With the Bluetooth scales, that extra quarter of a kilo was being recorded, so they felt like it was a pay rise. And over 30 days of harvesting, that adds up at the end of the month, so they were really happy with it. But the collection agents, they found it slowed them down because they had to sort of reset the scales and turn the engine off on their collection truck to make it reset to zero. And so the value prop there wasn't quite right, and we're trying to constantly find this balance of value prop for the provider, the customer, and the users within that ecosystem. Again, to take Seema's point about the wider ecosystem, it's not just the smallholder. And then, so finally, when we evolved into the accelerator, with the Innovation Fund, we've been working with telcos, we've been working with software companies and agritechs. And we built some good partnerships there, but what we wanted to do with the accelerator was, okay, let's build from the ground up. We kind of know what a telco needs and what they want, and when they start listening to an agritech is when they've got some scale and a revenue model that works. So let's focus on that ground layer and see how we can support. I don't want to go over the accelerator again, but how can we support that agritech to build a system that is then something that is interesting to a telco or other partner.
Thanks, Matt. And maybe taking this conversation forward to the subject around sustainability, where we're talking about balancing achieving that tricky balance between impact, profits, and sustainability for the organizations that you either support or you either work with. Riches, I just wanted to find out, you have been in the market, you've raised some commercial funding, which also comes with external parties joining the governance structure of the organization. So how do you still maintain that original motivation around resolving issues for the smallholder farmers, while at the same time ensuring that there's return on the investments?
Thanks a lot, Kevin. I think this is a very important question. And I say this because from the get-go, we have been very resolute, myself and the team, that whatever solution that we're creating, it has to be one that aligns impact with profitability and not a trade-off, right? Whatever the product is, whatever the solution is, it has to align both impact and profitability. And one key thing that we have equally done differently is that we haven't treated farmers as beneficiaries, but as business people, right? So we operate a B2B, and we consider the farmers themselves as business people. And perceiving them or seeing them as business people also allows us to ensure that whatever products that we're rolling out to them is impacting on their business, their core business, you know. So for example, just a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, we rolled out a new product called a produce collateralized credit, which allows farmers leverage on their raw material, you know, as a form of security to get access to credit. And this was birthed on the back of the fact that at harvest time, farmers or prices of commodities are pretty much always at the lowest point. But then after a couple of months later, the prices of those commodities, you know, would appreciate. And we thought about it. How could we use this information, again, solving something that a problem that the farmers really have? How can we leverage on this information, this data, to see how we could ensure that the farmers, what kind of commodities can they utilize? Because we know that as much as at harvest time prices are the lowest, a couple of months later it appreciates, it may not necessarily appeal to all commodities, right? So we leveraged on like 2-3 years data set on a month-to-month basis to see what commodity would really make the farmer make a gain from this, you know, while still ensuring that we are able to return investments or we're able to get to profitability, you know. So this is how we've approached it to ensure that we align impact and profitability. While we track on one hand things like the GMV, the amount of produce connected to market, the volume of tonnages and all of that, on the other hand, we are also tracking to what extent have we improved the farmers' income in terms of, and how much commodities have we helped them reduce in terms of spoilage. And this in turn, we have seen how in the kind of business that we run, it's almost impossible that if you help the farmers increase or if you help the farmers drive profitability on their own end, it's almost impossible that the business itself would not get profitable, because if you're helping the farmers sell more produce, reduce spoilage, increase income, which by extension would make the company sell more, do more transaction, close out more sales, in turn, it's almost like it's a symbiotic relationship, and this allows that the farmers are equally able to increase productivity while the company, you know, maintains profitability as well.
Thank you. Maybe moving on to Seema. I know you people are huge on financial inclusion for smallholders. You're trying to facilitate credit for the smallholder farmers. Could you share more on how you ensure that while delivering this particular impact, the business remains sustainable, and especially in the face of the high indebtedness that a lot of people are finding themselves in, especially in Kenya, in relation to the digital kind of lending activities that are happening in the market?
Sure. I mean, I think on our end, right, so I'll start with how we look at the dynamics of the business model, right, and then the revenue models. As you said, I think you've heard it on the panel, delivering last mile services, even if it's digitally, eventually, right, is really still expensive. And figuring out the right models, trust with farmers, there's a lot of training upfront, digital literacy, product training, so there's a really, really high cost. So when we look at the cost structure of most ag techs, and I think that's I don't want to say the myth, but the reality is ag tech is tech plus people, right? I think you do need that human in the loop, especially, early on as farmers, are still understanding your product, need the training. There's a big trust barrier, right? So the upfront costs of rolling out a model are quite huge. And then on the flip side, you've also got a fairly low disposable income with most of these, rural markets or smallholder farmers. So you're trying to now balance two things, right? You've got low margins on one hand, and then you've got a high cost to serve. So I think the biggest thing we start with is what's the value to the customer, right? And if that value is sticky enough, then they are willing to invest that disposable income, right? And I think, as Rich was saying, if you look at it as they are a business, so they're investing in their business, then there is a return for them as well. So I think starting with that premise is kind of what then led us down the journey of a sustainable business model. So we think it's managing both. I think the way we've looked at it is over time, digital will bring down the cost to serve this customer. So break down your upfront costs. What is that investment we're willing to make for the initial few years to roll out the product, ensure farmers understand what you're actually offering, but then over time, because they understand it, it's a more sustainable product because now the digital adoption actually takes over. So it's kind of a curve over time. I think in terms of the second question around really looking at indebtedness, I think for us with farmers, right, this goes down to, I think, risk assessment. And we do a lot of work around that. A big part of our evolution over the last 2 years from a DigiFarm perspective has also been to really think about risk assessment differently. What alternative data sets can we use? So not only do we look at a farmer's financial profile, which is kind of where you see the indebtedness and the ability and willingness to pay factor. But then what we're also finding is for farmers, there's a big missing piece that a lot of financial institutions or other players don't see because you don't know what are the sales actually coming from that farm. Because there's this missing gap of data, collecting that data using alternative data sets allows us to have a more comprehensive view. So I think in terms of indebtedness, we try and ensure, obviously you're not giving loans to customers that either have existing loans. I think there's, in Kenya at least, the credit reference bureaus have a lot of that data. The other thing we've also found is engaging the right community players. So that's why I said ecosystem is very important. The agribusinesses that we work with are very clear with us, right? They actually inform a lot of our product development. They'll say, no, don't give farmers X percentage, right? So we do kind of crop financing, as you were saying. If a farmer's delivering every day, they don't get paid until the end of the month. We give them, if they need cash flow within the month, they can take a loan against it. And the agribusinesses are quite clear, don't give them 100% against it because they do have other obligations. So I think a bit of it is also understanding the context and the market that you operate in to then tailor your product to ensure customers aren't indebted. The last piece I'd say there is financial literacy and financial training is a really, really critical component. So we do a lot of that upfront, but also over time we continue to partner with some of the credit reference bureaus in Kenya to be able to provide that training as well.
Thanks, and thank you for mentioning the risk assessment aspect. Maybe moving it higher to somebody looking at a program or taking care of the program. I want to look at it in form of due diligence, Justin. So how have you used due diligence to basically ensure that you're balancing the objectives as far as program impact is concerned, but at the same time ensuring that you are able to still catalyze sustainable agri-tech business models.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think with all has been discussed when it comes to trust, traceability, feasibility of the solution when it comes to the agri-tech. It's still a challenge to people to understand what really agri-tech is. And honestly, to be clear, it's not even still clear when it comes to agri-tech. At some point, maybe as our experience when we were struggling in the beginning to design a product, as in the whole program, we could see like it's agri-tech. But then we were like, is it gonna be AI? Is it gonna be fintech? Is it gonna be biotech? And now understanding that everything comes together in the benefit of a farmer itself, we were like, let's have something that is really speaking a language of a farmer. But then how do we now bring in as something that is tailored to the agriculture sector generally? Now, when it comes to many techs applying, now they have good solutions. Everyone knows how to use the ChatGPT. They can have good applications, fill in what we want to hear, what we want to see in the applications. They really respond to the criteria. But then when it comes now to going to the due diligence, the due diligence comes in as now matching what is sent on the platform in applications to what's really on the ground and how does it really work, and then is it really something that is really existing? We always get surprised. You may have somebody that comes in, get shortlisted, get to the bootcamp, acceleration. When they're speaking, you feel like it's a good business. It really works, as in you feel like it's going to be really a solution to what you want to see. But then when you get to the field, now the solution seems to be a story. So the due diligence comes in as in when it comes to, even though it's a grant, it still has to be really a scalable business that we need to provide. We are scaling, we putting in the investment to make sure that your solution that you're providing it is, first of all, sustainable. It's going to impact many livelihoods, that is farmers, that is going to bring in the gender inclusion, youth inclusion. Even though you have a good solution, but we also need to see how big is the impact that you're having. So doing the due diligence brings in the financial viability assessment, sustainability, understanding the traction that you have already. You may have a prototype, but that doesn't really guarantee any future. So we always have the spread. When you are funding the startup, but at some point you also get this kind of surprises. Somebody has a good idea, you validate, it's a good project, but when it comes to implementation, it doesn't really work. So we evaluate in the due diligence, we typically see to the team, the ability of the team to really consume what we are going to provide. As yes, we want to scale, but are you really able to absorb the capacity that you're requesting you're requesting? First of all, second of all, you also have the ability to implement. That is the team capability, sustainability of the whole take, and then the feasibility. It may sound a very good solution, but now when it comes to, I was discussing with Kevin yesterday, I'm very excited that MTN has already 300 million, that is a half of the population of the country, people connected, subscribed. So if we could have a solution that channels to what existing and make sure that we now bring in, and we all have the SMS, taking an example of the country, when we have the Umuganda, the last Saturday cleaning, so we always send a message, oh, we have this on Saturday and everything. What if we have a similar thing on the farmer level? Then now when we're doing the due diligence, now we see, is this solution really works for the farmer? As Richard said, looking at a farmer as a business, does it really bring the profit to the farmer? Why would I adopt your solution? Does it really make my cost little? Does it really bring in the productivity? If you could see the techs that are already in place are already impacting up to 60% yield. Does it really respond to what I need? We have the Agritech solutions that are already in the program that provide the sensors. So if I have the sensor in place, maybe in my greenhouse or open space, do I have the the NPK levels, what fertilizers do I need to apply? If I need to also have the weather forecast to predict where do I need to plant, what do I expect as a farmer. That is basically what a business should also predict, like when you're planting, what do I expect, what are the risks in place, what do I now put in place to make sure that when the risk comes, how do I handle that? So providing the solution that is gonna make sure the business, a farmer as a business really have a higher productivity, and then the risks that are hedged. That's what we need to see as a solution that you're providing in the Agritech. And then, yes, as the program generally, then and for sure, if we put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 businesses together, it's going to respond to what the country needs. Yep.
Thank you, Justin. And in 2 minutes, we will be coming to the audience. So in case you have any questions, just prepare them. Then maybe to Matt, in terms of being able to sustainably scale and achieve the desired impact, what do you think is the role of maybe grants or subsidies or even patient capital whenever you're trying to actually scale these agricultural innovations?
Yeah. So we've seen, it's been documented, Seema's touched on it, that since I think over the last 5 years, it's about a 60% reduction in investment in Agritech specifically. So, you know, there's a funding gap there. We're seeing more acutely that donors are also reducing their budgets that are going into overseas aid. So, you know, something's got to fill that gap. And we also see this we're calling it a missing middle. So grants, subsidies, they're kind of generally in the sort of sub 200K type region. Investors we can see lots that are in the post or above 1 million, but in this 500K to 1 million range, there's a real lack of funding and kind of, yeah, a lack of appetite, I guess, from the investors. And this is, when the Agritechs we've been talking to, they may not be ready yet to take on a much larger debt equity arrangement with an investor, and want to take another sort of smaller step in this missing middle area. So in terms of scaling Agritechs, it's got to be done in a way that is sustainable for them as an organization while their revenues catch up with the kind of debt and equity, the debt they're taking on. There is an argument where grants are artificially keeping afloat a company. If it's an Agritech and it's a business, is a grant artificially keeping that business afloat? Because there isn't a business model there. If that grant is being used for OPEX rather than CAPEX, then is it artificially keeping that business alive? Obviously, in a case where it's not-for-profit or a social enterprise, then of course, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But if it's a commercially sustainable business, it's got to be able to stand on its own 2 feet at some point. So, and then with subsidies, you know, it's a difficult area because a subsidy disincentivizes perhaps a business to set up in the first place. If, you know, as a very basic example of fertilizer subsidy, there's a disincentive to provide input loans to farmers. And then just on the patient capital side, so we know agriculture is cyclical. It's not like a fintech or a service that you are generating data daily and can tweak and adapt and modify that product on a almost weekly or bi-weekly sprint. Agriculture is slow. You've got to wait for the seasons, and so your learning opportunities are that bit reduced. And so the patient capital, the investors, they need to come up with a model and an approach which recognizing that fact in the cycles and the timelines of Agritechs in order to give them a chance to make those learnings, those tweaks.
Thank you. So we come to the audience. Are there any questions to the panelists? And as you're fielding your questions, if it is possible to identify the particular panelist that you want to direct the question to.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to send my question to the GSMA Green Fund. I think when you come to Africa here, one of the major problems we are having is we have to have analysis on the soil. which type of product are you going to be having before you even go for the loans? Because even when you go for the loans, you give them the returns they are going to get from the from the soil. So I think, what are you going to do in that aspect? Do you have enough research data on the soil so that it will help us in post-harvest loss? Because at the time you are putting all this into the soil, you find out, okay, the number of things you get out is not guaranteed. And by the time you use a different type of, example, a fertilizer today, tomorrow by the time you are coming, the product fertility reduced. So is there enough data on the soil analysis or the texture so that we can leverage on that, so that if anyone wants to do research, he can link up from that gap? Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can take another question as well.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tawanda from the Gates Foundation. My question is directed to Matthew and Seema. So there's something interesting I found from what you said, that you've seen the evolution of models whereby, as opposed to expecting the smallholder farmer to pay, you find some other stakeholders or industry players like agribusinesses who have an interest in seeing smallholder farmers do well. Now my question is, do you see a world in which, rather than just one company, there is a pre-competitive arrangement whereby there's a coalition of private sector entities all converging to finance, whatever agtech services are providing, because there is an incentive to do so? That's my first question. Then the second one is, do you see a world in which governments can actually, contract or subcontract some of these, agtech, for the simple reason that we're seeing a diminishing budget in terms of traditional extension systems, advisory services, etc. So as digital has a low cost of delivery, are you seeing that reality possible in partnership with MNOs? Thank you.
Maybe we can take one last one, and then, yeah. Thank you. Another mic. Maybe we can...
Sure.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm struggling to hear ever so slightly, but the first question was around soil data and understanding soil health and how we can make sure it's productive going forward, right? Is that about fair? Okay. So I'm not gonna pretend to be an agronomist. I work in Agritech, so I play with phones and digital. But having said that, it's around data, right? It's under measuring, monitoring, assessing, and adapting. So what is my land doing now? How is that changing? What are the conditions that have led to that yield? And then what is happening, getting a trend over time, and therefore talking to the right people about what do I need to do. So therefore, being able to access the right types of service that are going to give me sensible advice about what to do next. And so I don't want to repeat the panel, but essentially it's things, do I trust the service? If I'm using this thing, do I trust the information that I've been given? Because I've been listening to my father and my grandfather for years, and so far it's been okay. But the climate is changing, right? And so how do I make myself more resilient to be able to adapt, or not prevent, but prepare for changes? And so this is where some of the services we've worked with, like crop insurance, for instance, can that be bundled with another service that I'm using, so that if I if I sign up to DigiFarm, I'm using this as an example, so forgive me, but if I sign up to DigiFarm and I'm paying off my loan, is there some way that insurance could be bundled with that in case I have a flood or don't get the rain? So I realise I'm veering slightly away from the soil health, but that's because I'm not an agronomist. So, but it's more about being informed and armed with the right level of information so that I can be treating my soil in the right way.
Do you want to add something?
Yes, I also wanted to, yes, I understand that when you are venturing in agriculture, the soil is what you start with. With the Alliance, let me highlight this, we also have that soil scientists in place, and we have available data for soil. If you want to know the baselines, the status of the soil. We also have the tech companies that are already providing that. I think it's a matter of accessing all the information that is available. And yes, as he mentioned, the ancestors can also provide you with what you have, like with existing data. But yes, there's data accessible on soil science, on soil health levels, and yes, access to the Agritech that are already in place that can also help you with that.
Can I just add one thing? Sorry. Just, if I had unlimited resources, there's precision farming, there are IoT devices I could be sticking in the soil, and that's giving me real-time data, and I know whether to turn the taps on and irrigate, but it's about context, right? And so resource limited, it's not going to be accessible to everybody. So there are tools and systems and processes, and I think someone's in this room that does exactly that. But for the average smallholder farmer, at the moment, in sub-Saharan Africa, it's probably not accessible.
And then there was the other question around evolution of models, private sector, entity involvement, and even government participation. So any of you can probably take it.
Sure, I'll start with the government participation, and then I'll repeat the first question and make sure I get it right. So on the government side, I think the answer is yes, absolutely, right? And I think we've kind of been seeing two schools of thought. One is around the idea of digital public infrastructure, right? And what does that look like for agriculture? I always use the example of financial services. So if you look at most countries today, or national ID systems, that's what allows you to walk into a bank and get any sort of service, right? Or any other service in the country. Now for agriculture, the equivalent is your KYF, Know Your Farm, right? That, at some level as a, private sector company, and I think for a lot of us, we spend a lot of time and money having to collect it, constantly validate it, and I think there's a layer that maybe should be supported as digital public infrastructure, which then allows all of us to build services on top of. So I think that's one model that's getting a lot of, visibility, traction, a lot of discussions out there about it. I think we've seen some good examples in India, actually, with how that system's working. And then I think direct partnerships, absolutely as well, right? So I think I'll give you an example. So today we're testing an AI chatbot. So it's just very simple, based on WhatsApp, where farmers can, interact with the chatbot and ask questions. Fairly low, small-scale pilot, but it's trained actually on the Ministry of Agriculture data, right? So the extension services that they typically provide through humans, we've now trained the model using, kind of the data that they already have, or the open source manuals that they have. So I think those partnerships exist, and then especially to now scale those, a couple of different models are emerging. So agree with you, that's definitely a possibility. I don't know if you got the first question.
If I heard correctly, it was about to sort of fill this funding gap for multiple partners to join together and sort of provide that support as one, if you like. So, in principle, absolutely. But the reality is that different organizations at different stages of their strategy, or like on paper, of course it can work. But there are different organizations are going to be working at different cycles, different strategy cycles, and it's getting that long-term commitment and also aligning on KPI. So it's more, I think it's more looking up in terms of how do you guys report compared to the potential partner that you're working with, who's putting what into the table, and that commitment over a period of time to provide that support. And different organizations are going to be set up differently to enable for instance, one donor might be able to give grants for innovation funds, but another donor, it's got to go all into technical assistance. And so how, of course, there's a little bit of due diligence on your part to find the right partner. So it can work, it's very difficult, as with lots of things in life. So in principle, yes, and I think with the current ecosystem that we find ourselves in, it's something that's going to have to become more of a reality.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right, in practical terms, I remember a couple of, I think the two governments before the current government in Nigeria, they tried rolling out, they were very bullish in agriculture, where they rolled out a lot of credit using the Ministry of Agriculture to rural smallholder farmers. And we saw how that really failed, because it was a case where they were giving farmers who were not creditworthy or did not know the extent to which they were credit worthy, right? So it was a case where they were putting square pegs in round holes. Howbeit, just recently, we've seen how governments like the Edo State governments in Nigeria have engaged private sectors who have been dealing with smallholder farmers for the longest of time and have data about farmers in terms of their productivity, their yields, the average yield per acre or per hectare, the value of those commodities. And all of those data sets were plugged into to create a credit score, credit rating for that smallholder farmer. So it's now a case where when the farmers are being provided credit or financing, it's not just providing the financing to the farmer, but equally knowing to what extent is the farmer credit worthy or credit worthy, yes, so that when credit are issued to that farmer, it's provided to them in the level to which that they require, in order for them not to mismanage it and it just be used to what it's meant to be.
Maybe one last question.
My first question goes to Justin. I wanted to know which approach do you use practically to support and engage farmers in a holistic manner when it comes to collect their data. Number two is for...
Please come again.
Yes,
I think she's struggling to...
I mean,
yes.
Which approach do you practically use to support and engage farmers in a holistic manner when it comes to data collections? Number two goes to, sorry, I didn't memorize your name, Seema?
Yes, Seema.
Seema, thank you. When we take the African context, agriculture is still tricky and it is full of many challenges. I wanted to know which kind of mechanism do you apply when it comes to collect repayment on the credit you provide to farmers, especially small farmers? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Coming to the approach that we use to collect data on farmers, I think it's something that is not done directly or just right away. It always gets to, when it comes to the program level, when it comes to what you impact as a farmer, how do you impact the farmer, we always have this approach of knowing how do you impact a farmer. That is the only data that we have. Now, it goes to if a farmer, let's say if you have a solution, the Agritech, so I'm going to take it in that direction, the Agritech, so we know the area of land that let's say if you're providing a solution that is maybe sensors, how big is the land that you're really providing the solution to? The area of land that is acres or hectares, then we collect now the data of weather, forecast, if you're providing that, and then the risk that the farmer has, and then the solution that you're providing, and then the yield improvement, either productivity, and then how do you really bring in the solution to that farmer at the end? That is the only solution that we have. But when it comes to collecting data on, generally as an organization, we do have a data collection period that we go for the soil science, soil collection, soil health level collection, weather forecast, different practices in place that the organization is providing. But in the case of the Agritech, we only do with yield, inclusion, how to impact a farmer, and then at the end, how the livelihood of a farmer can improve. Yeah.
Over to you, Seema.
I think I got it right, which was methodology for predicting repayment.
Yes.
Is that fair? So I think for repayments, we look at it generally in two ways, and I'm going to make the assumption here that I know you talked about it in Africa in general, but I think for now we work in markets that tend to have mobile money transactions, right? So we break it down into two: willingness and ability to pay is how we look at the repayment model. Willingness tends to be primarily from credit reference bureaus. So, have they defaulted on previous loans? And, that tends to be kind of available data through most reference bureaus. The ability to pay is actually the harder one. I think, again, we tend to work in markets that have mobile money. So most farmers you'll see don't have traditional financial services. They might be part of, like in Kenya you call them chamas, or kind of smaller microfinance organizations, things like, or SACCOs, but they'll also tend to have a mobile money presence. So that gives us a bit of a sense of their financial profile, which is one key piece that goes into their ability to repay. But the bigger piece actually, and this is why we focus specifically on agri-financing, is now looking at the yield predictions for that actual farm. So we do some upfront data collection when a farmer registers to understand which crop that they're actually growing, how many acreage, right? So that gives us a bit of a sense of what they're actually, their yield is predicted for. But I think where we're now actually going, and this is the exciting thing with AI models and kind of GIS data, we're now actually looking at and we're building models that give you those predictions. So you can do field boundary mapping. From a field boundary mapping, you can start looking at crop monitoring, right? Crop monitoring then starts giving you yield prediction. So I think some of the power of AI and some of these new models coming up is really, really enhancing our ability to look at yield prediction, because a farmer in growing maize, right, in one part of the country, and could be the next county over, has a very different yield because of soil, because of climate issues, just all of these different data sets. So I think that's where, I think the evolution now of, kind of repayment models will move to, because at the core of repayment is yield, right, and yield prediction. Lastly, I'll say that's, where we also use traditional data is they're selling to agri-SMEs. So those agri-SMEs have data, right, in terms of how much did they sell, how much did the farmers get paid for, so all of that goes into kind of a prediction model.
Thanks, Seema. And probably before I come back to the panelists for 15 to 30 seconds, closing remarks, I just wanted to share the two resources, which are basically outputs of the work that has been carried out by the GSMA Agritech Accelerator Program for the last 2 to 3 years. So feel free to scan and read the resources. In case there are questions, reach out to the respective teams. 20 seconds, closing remark on the discussion for the day. We can start with you, Richard.
Thank you again. As an operator, I will probably my closing remark would be for operators as well. And I'd say build what farmers want and not what you think they want. Because when you build what they want and not what you think they want, then adoption will be easy. Thanks.
Do what farmers want. Yes, Justin?
Thank you so much. In short, Agritech is possible, and when it's backed by science, it is far beyond what we can expect as a resilience in the agriculture sector.
Do what you want, back it up with science. Seema?
Ensure you have the right customer need. Figure it out. It's the core of everything.
Customer is king. Matt?
I'm going to steal something that someone said earlier, that tech, so tech's not the challenge, but trust is the challenge. And then you can't do it alone with tech. It's people and partnerships is where we're going to really have effect.
Thank you all for a great discussion, Justin, Riches, Seema, and Matt. Ladies and gentlemen, let's appreciate our panelists this morning. And finally, a huge thank you to everyone in the room. And please feel free to carry on with the discussions beyond this room. Thank you all.
Thank you. Hold on.